There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Shoff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Shoff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes of Kannapolis, North Carolina. We are pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here only by the grace of God. Remember also, folks, that we are on YouTube. Dial us up. What in the World is Going On by Richard Shoff, available 24/7. Want to give you what I promised from last week. I want to give you what I have on the Kavanaugh betrayal. I've only got two sources, and for something like this, I like three. But because of the two I've got, I'm going to give it to you and putting this disclaimer on. I'm telling you this so that you'll be careful, that you'll keep your eyes open, not that I have proof. But Joseph Farrar is flaying the man who pushed Sarah Day O'Connor and claims that's latest Trump pick. Also, I heard this on Rush Limbaugh on the radio. Their expose, not mine. I'm just passing it on. Using the words of Farrar, I hate to say it, but I saw this one coming. When President Trump selected Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court, I knew it was least a very risky pick. But Kavanaugh won the hearts of conservatives because of the insanity of the opposition. Now we know for certain that Brett Kavanaugh is a fraud. Folks, those are Farrar's words, not mine. He should never have been President Trump's first choice. He's a weakling. He buckled to the extreme left to salvage his own reputation. I had a bad feeling about this guy, ever since his role in the Vince Foster cover-up and his tutelage by former independent counsel Kenneth Starr. How many times do we have to see this kind of betrayal by Republican nominees of Supreme Court justices? We had Sandra Day O'Connor, David Souter, John Roberts. Oh yeah, John Roberts. Remember about a year ago when he was a deciding vote on the Supreme Court that gave us a continuance of Obamacare? Well, just yesterday, Friday, I'm taping this on Saturday before the broadcast. This past Friday, he sold us out again. That's right, there was a bill our Justice Department was bringing, a charge that they were trying to override a lower court that was blocking some of Trump's immigration policies. And it went before the Supreme Court as far as whether that lower court ruling would take effect right now or whether it be continued. Our Justice Department wanted it continued. Roberts voted with the liberals to give the liberals what they want without hearing the whole case. Once again, John Roberts has sold us out. But let's review the facts on Kavanaugh. In 1981, it was a young Justice Department lawyer, Kenneth Starr, who authored a hurriedly prepared air-filled memo. This according to Robert Novak and Roland Evans. This article that he prepared convinced President Reagan to go through with the nomination of Sandra Day O'Connor to the High Court. And folks, there was tremendous opposition from those who believed she was unfit and unworthy of Reagan's support. And me speaking again, I was part of that was trying to discourage the Reagan administration from putting her through. I believed what I heard at the time. I remember the whole incident. This phony memo gave O'Connor a clean bill of health on abortion by using legal gymnastics to explain her Arizona legislative record. That's a quote from Evans and Novak in writing. He wrote that she had no recollection of how she voted on a 1970 bill to legalize abortion when in fact she was a co-sponsor of the measure that was defeated 6-3 in committee. Starr misrepresented that O'Connor was something of a friend and associate of Arizona pro-life leader Dr. Caroline Gerster. In fact, Gerster told Evans and Novak, quote, I had an adversary position with Sandra Day O'Connor, and called her, quote, one of the most powerful pro-abortionists in the Arizona Senate when she was in it. So-called conservatives have continued to give Starr a pass on this monstrous disservice to Reagan and to America. Well, he just did it again to Donald Trump with Kavanaugh. It's unbelievable, but it's true. Next, in the 80s, or in the 90s, conservatives billed everyone but Starr for the failed investigations of Bill Clinton. Starr enabled Clinton. He enabled him. And now we have one of his disciples doing the same thing Sandra Day O'Connor did. This time he gave us Brett Kavanaugh. Starr mentored Kavanaugh. The two of them covered up the truth in the Vince Foster death, actually firing the prosecutor who raised too many obvious questions. Then, according to Farrar, he began to figure it out. Starr was not an independent investigator at all. He was a designated fixer. He was the cleaner. He was the handler. He was the guy who protected the powerful from themselves. He was the Cohen of his day. Farrar speaking again, as I've said before, Starr was either one of the most incompetent prosecutors in the history of the country or complicit in the cover-up of those crimes, and I lean toward the latter judgment. In 2006, Starr was back in the news again. This time he was accused of sending fake letters from jurors asking California Governor Schwarzenegger for clemency for a convicted rapist murderer headed for death row. Starr withdrew with the letters, all but admitting they were fraudulent. Starr, later the dean of Pepperdine University Law School, said he was taking the allegations of forged documents with, quote, utmost seriousness, end quote. He tried to blame one of his investigators for the, quote, mistake. The Starr historical legacy can best be summarized like this. He deceived President Reagan about O'Connor, let Clinton off the hook for monstrous crimes, used chicanery to prevent the execution of justice in California, and paved the way for the career of fake conservative Brett Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh just voted with the high court's leftists to stop Republican efforts to defund Planned Parenthood at the state level. In dissent, Justice Clarence Thomas accused the majority of abdicating its duty for political reasons. So what explains the court's refusal to do its job here? Thomas wrote, I suspect it was something to do with the fact that one of the respondents in these cases are named Planned Parenthood. Thomas asserted that a tenuous connection to a politically fraught issue does not justify advocating our judicial duty, end quote. He's so right. This is a cosmic tragedy. Why do we still have abortion on demand as well as taxpayer-funded mega-abortion mill Planned Parenthood? Because of justices like Sandra Day O'Connor, and now Brett Kavanaugh. Thanks, Ken Starr. Recently, Starr's name came up in the news prominently again. Few noticed it. What was it this time? Get this, folks. He was helping serial pedophile abuser Jeffrey Epstein off the hook. Me talking. Let's be fair, but let's keep our minds open. Let's watch Kavanaugh. Maybe he's going to be okay on some of the other issues. But according to Farrar, he sold us out on the abortion issue. I know the history of this. I remember the days of Sandra Day O'Connor and David Souter. And now, Chief Justice Roberts. Is Kavanaugh in that same boat? Now to our featured subject this week. And boy, we've got our hands full here, haven't we? Let's look at immigration in general, and let's look at the wall specifically. There's a lot to be said here, folks. A whole lot. By the way, did you know that we spend more money from our government on the sugar subsidy than we do on our security wall on our southern border? Did you know that? Thought you'd like to. The incredibly high cost of illegal immigration is being used by the globalists to bankrupt our country. They'll stop at nothing to destroy us and turn us into a third world nation. We're hearing a lot about Afghanistan. Well, folks, did you know we've been at war for 17 years in Afghanistan? That's the longest war in U.S. history, and we haven't won it yet. How many more lives do we need to have taken over there? How many more dollars do we need to spend? And I remember many years ago when Russia was fighting The Afghans, we were on the Afghan side. They bankrupted the old Soviet Union. That's right. That's what caused the Berlin Wall to come tumbling down. They were bankrupt. Back in the days of Reagan, they couldn't beat Afghanistan, and they were on the border with them. We've been there 17 years, and we haven't settled it. But boy, it sure fits in for the globalists, doesn't it? It sure drains our economy and our lives, our military. It's globalism, listeners. It's globalism versus the rights of the individual nations. It's for UN dominance of the world. That's what's at stake. That's why we lost General Mattis, a good general. But his basic philosophy, being military, being a great military leader, was for the military. And it fit in with globalism. And our president is for America first. A difference in conception. But which side of the fence are you on? You know, the American people have been told since George Bush that immigrants were coming here to do the jobs that Americans won't do. We've been told about how much they contribute to the economy and taxes. This is done to change the discussion about the actual numbers and impact on the economy that immigrants have cost the country and the taxpayers. Legal and illegal immigrants have placed a burden on the taxpayers of this country that's become more and more burdensome. Of course, in today's politically correct world, to claim that immigrants claim more benefits than they give into the system is considered racist. Immigrants are to be coddled, their every wish granted. They should be made welcome, whether they're contributing to the system or not. Illegal is the normal definition of the word that's been replaced with undocumented. Does this mean they're welcome here? That they just have to wait for the paperwork to catch up? A report from the Center for Immigration Reform states that 51% of immigrant households, legal and illegal, use at least one welfare program, while only 35% of American households use at least one benefit. And the length of the time that they're here is not a determining factor. Long-term immigrants to our country use just as many benefits as short-term immigrants, only for a longer period of time. The immigrants in the country now are not even recognized as a burden by the previous administration. If Democrats have their way, immigrants will be eligible for Social Security, which many have not paid into. They'll be eligible for Medicare and Medicare, unemployment insurance, assistance for needy families, public education, and the expansion of all public services will be made available. Welfare benefits alone total over $900 billion a year. That's right, over $900 billion a year, and we can't get $5 billion to put a wall up. But we're spending welfare benefits over $900 billion a year to take care of these immigrants. And the cost of public education averages $12,000 a student. Even the legal immigrant population receives more benefits than native households. The average immigrant household averages $25,000 in benefits while only paying $10,300 in taxes. That's if they pay taxes at all. A recent study puts the cost of illegal aliens at $70,000 a year per immigrants. As of now, and according to federal law, immigrants are not eligible for Obamacare or means-tested welfare. But even now, folks, there are attempts by both the state and at the federal level to make illegal immigrants eligible for both, as well as a push for citizenship with appropriate federal and state shortcuts to enable them to become citizens and, of course, able to vote. All of this is already law in California. Did you know that? And this is going to give the progressive a voting bloc that will be reliably voting Democratic. These people will not vote Republican if they fear the Republicans will cut the benefits that they should not be eligible for in the first place. And how much of these benefits in the overall government, how much of it is in the government budget? By government estimates, the annual deficit for immigration households was $54 billion in 2015, and more than double that now. After the 13-year transition phase, making immigrants eligible for Obamacare and full welfare benefits, the total would reach $176 billion. And what are we looking for the wall? $5 billion. And we can't get it. Man, does that stink. With the full amnesty that the progressives are trying to push through Congress, the average illegal immigrant will receive over $59,000 more in government benefits than he would pay in taxes. As of now, it's estimated that 45% of all illegal immigrants work off the books, and they don't even pay taxes. This estimate is considered low by the IRS, who's now changed how illegal immigrants are counted. When all the numbers are considered, it comes down to the fact that immigrants, both legal and illegal, receive $2.49 in benefits for every $1 they pay in taxes. And that is if they pay any taxes at all. Have you noticed how Trump is being blocked in every area every time he tries to control the immigrants? Remember back, he was stopping the Muslim from bringing in terrorists from the Middle East, and we get a federal court judge someplace in Hawaii or someplace in California that says it's illegal, stops it. He stopped at every turn of the road. Well, a U.S. judge just this past Wednesday struck down the Trump administration policies aimed at restricting asylum claims by people citing gang or domestic violence in their home country and ordered the United States, listen to this, to take back 6 deported migrants to reconsider their cases. Man, what are we thinking of? The ruling is the latest legal setback for the White House on immigration. Last month, a judge in San Francisco ordered a halt to a policy that prevented those entering illegally from Mexico from seeking asylum. The policy at the center of Wednesday's ruling sought to limit the ability of immigrants to fight expedited deportation by narrowing the grounds for claiming, quote, credible fear if they returned home. That's the first step in a long asylum process. The policy was challenged in a district court of Columbia, brought by dozens of adults and children. U.S. Judge Emmett Sullivan said in a 107-page opinion that policy violated both immigration and administrative law. And because it is the will of Congress, not the whims of the executive, that determines the standard for expedited removal, the court finds that these policies are unlawful. That was written by Judge Sullivan. In a statement, the Department of Justice said administration policy sought to follow Congress' requirement that asylum be limited to those with a fear of persecution or prosecution based on their race, nationality, religion, political opinion, or membership in a social group. The Department of Justice filed a request to stay the court's order while the government appealed, and Sullivan has not responded to that request. For the last 3 months of 2017, those are the most recent numbers, the government conducted about 6,000 credible fear interviews monthly. Jennifer Chang Newell, she's an American Civil Liberties Union attorney representing the asylum seekers, said the ruling is a, quote, defeat for the Trump administration all-out assault on the rights of asylum seekers. The administration has said that the asylum process is being abused by people who have frivolous claims but are able to stay in the country while their cases are being decided. In a separate case, U.S. Judge John Tiger in San Francisco last Wednesday extended his previous order that blocked Trump's policy to bar those entering illegally from Mexico from seeking asylum. The preliminary injunction ordered by Tiger will remain in place while the litigation unfolds unless the U.S. Supreme Court intervenes. And now they have said, thanks to Judge Roberts, that they will not. Illegal crossings at the southern border have dropped dramatically since the late 70s, but in recent years, applications for asylums have ballooned, and more Central American families and unaccompanied children are migrating to the United States. Just last Tuesday, the United States committed billions of dollars toward development in Central America and Mexico as part of a plan to curb illegal immigration. And folks, we can't even get $5 billion for our wall. But what we committed to Central America and Mexico was twice the cost of the wall. How do you like those apples? Well, Congress has failed to reach an appropriations agreement, and the government is into a partial shutdown. This happened as of midnight. I want to ask you, when has the government ever failed to pay any employee or any benefits just because they were shut down? Can you think of one time? No, you can't because it's never happened. There's been 18 shutdowns since 1976, but all furloughed employees get paid as soon as the government starts back to work. They have every time paid every employee that was sent home, even though they didn't work, because the government sent them home. Every benefit's been paid. But you see these sorry liberals go on television and cry out about, oh, so-and-so from my home district is suffering at Christmas time. They're not going to get their Christmas check. They're not working, but they're going to get their Christmas check. They're just going to wait until the government fires back up to get it. Not one time in those 18 shutdowns have we failed to pay them. That's right, folks. But you don't see that on MSNBC. You don't see that on CNN. You don't hear it on ABC. What shenanigans. Oh, and meanwhile, did you see Nancy Pelosi? Boy, is she feeling good. She got caught on camera, though, singing and dancing at a Washington bar. Did you hear about that? Well, I said that the Republicans had a great week. The Democrats had a great week. The Republican lawmakers, first they folded, again on the border, but they got that straightened out. Military hero and Trump supporter Michael Flynn was abused and harassed in court and told he sold his country out by an uninformed judge. And the Federal Reserve continued to ensure the record Trump economy will be stalled out for the foreseeable future. Well, last Wednesday night, Nancy Pelosi was caught out at a D.C. bar dancing her cares away. Pelosi was out partying with Democrats at the Republican Joe Crowley's going-away party. You know, Joe was soundly defeated in the New York primary by Socialist Democrat Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Joe Crowley played the guitar and sang while Pelosi and other Democrats danced the night away. But wait. What happened? Our president came through. He said he wasn't going to sign the bill, and he didn't. And thankfully, he shut the government down. God bless him. And boy, did this make me feel good in a bad week. Did you see about that Iraq war veteran with GoFundMe? Yeah, GoFundMe page for the border wall. An Iraq war veteran who lost 3 of his limbs and is trying to raise money for Donald Trump's border wall. And the effort has already taken in more than $1.5 million. As of this morning, Saturday morning, I heard that's now up to $5 million. The GoFundMe page went live this week, and as of 9 p.m. Wednesday, was off to a quick start with its goal of $1 billion. The effort was started by retired Air Force Senior Airman Brian Kolfage. He was severely injured in a 2004 blast in Iraq. He lost both of his legs and his right hand, and has since become a motivational speaker and an architect. As a veteran who was given 3 limbs, he said, I feel deeply invested in this nation to ensure future generations have everything we have today. Too many Americans have been murdered by illegal aliens, and too many illegals are taking advantage of the United States taxpayers with no means of ever contributing to our society. Kolfage wrote those words on the GoFundMe page. He said, and I quote, I have grandparents who immigrated to America legally. They built it the correct way, and it's time to uphold our laws. And this wall will get built. It's up to Americans to help out and pitch in with this project. Let's get it rolling. Trump promised to build a border wall between the U.S. and Mexico during the 2016 campaign, but lawmakers have been unable to agree on funding the project. The spat has led to a government shutdown, and although it's a temporary funding solution, it's being discussed, but it does not contain any wall funding. But folks, it ain't over yet. The fat lady hasn't sang. Like this guy, Todd Rokita, R-O-K-I-T-E. He was on television. He was also on Newsmax television, and he said the shutdowns are all about priorities. Pretty interesting. The government shutdown is not really a shutdown, but instead has to do with the priorities of lawmakers. Who is this guy? It's Representative Todd Rokita of Indiana, R-O-K-I-T-A. Hadn't seen him before, but sure liked it, his appearance. He did an appearance Thursday on America's Talk Live, and he spoke with his host, John Cordillo, from the House floor about the shutdown threat that grew more dire after President Trump said he would not sign the current spending bill being floated because it fails to address border security. Nancy Pelosi is going to take over, he said. This is our last chance to protect ourselves as a sovereign nation, to offer border security to the American people, which they overwhelmingly want. So I am just pleased, at least for a brief reprieve, that we're still in the game here, and that through the leadership of guys like Mark Meadows, Jim Jordan, and other Freedom Caucus members, and even conservatives who are not in the Freedom Caucus like myself, we've been able to let this thing go into extra innings. Trump and other conservatives want several $1 billion included in the Homeland Security budget that can be used to build the wall. That's the wall between Mexico and the United States. With Democrats preparing to take control of the House next month, Republicans would face an uphill battle securing any money for the wall for at least the next 2 years. Here's the whole point. Are they for the people of this country, the citizens of this country, the taxpayers of this country, the voters of this country, or are they for illegal aliens? That's the choice before us, folks. It's got nothing to do with the shutdown. It has everything to do with what your priorities are. Couldn't have said it better myself. And folks, did you see the White House Stephen Miller get into that heated discussion with the government? White House Senior Policy Stephen Miller blamed Democrats for the looming government shutdown, saying in a Thursday interview with CNN's Wolf Blitzer that their stance on the wall amounted to taking a position against border security. I saw this interview myself personally, and I want to tell you, Wolf did everything he could to overcome this guy, and he didn't do it. Stephen Miller stood tall. It was last Thursday. President Donald Trump had informed House GOP leaders that he would not sign a continuing resolution passed by the Senate the day before because it didn't contain funding for the proposed wall. Miller responded by taking the Democrats' stance on border security by issue. He pointed out the Democrats voted against Kate's Law. They voted against sanctuary cities. They voted against deporting MS-13 gang members. They voted against deporting violent criminals. They voted time and time again against a physical border wall to stop illegal entry. Where is the evidence that you keep asserting that they're for border security? They haven't been. They oppose even closing loopholes for asylum. I'm just saying I believe government will be funded as long as Democrats will make good on their rhetoric that you cite and agree to vote for border security, he continued, before they cut him off. Blitzer responded, but what if there's no $5 billion in the legislation between now and tomorrow night? Well, we'll see what happens, Wolf. But I believe that hopefully some Democrats will come to their senses and support the mainstream common sense border security. Of course, folks, they didn't. Miller continued, we've got to have a bill that keeps America safe. The president's been clear about that in his remarks at the signing ceremony for the Farm Bill, and I'm not going to negotiate with you on air. The House is going to pass a bill and send it to the Senate, and we'll see what happens there. You know, when you say we'll see what happens, is that a good enough answer for the nearly 1 million federal workers, many of them law enforcement types, who are not going to get a paycheck after midnight? That was Blitz's counterstatement. But folks, I send you back to the record. Every time the government's been shut down for many, many years, every employee has got their pay. Everybody entitled to a subsidy check, whether it was Social Security or something else, got their check. Every time, folks. Every time. And again, as you look at the military situation, as we say that the president says more than 5,000 troops to be withdrawn from Afghanistan, let me ask you, how many more years do you think we ought to spend there? 17 years. Longest war in our history. Same people that bankrupted the Soviet Union. They didn't beat them. We haven't beat them in 17 years. How many more lives will it take? But do you see the drain this is causing on our government, on our country? These are the globalists. These are the one-worlders. These are not those that are looking to make America great again. Thank you, Mr. President, for rebuffing some of your top advisors. I'm sorry that Jim Mattis had to go. I think he's a great general. but I think he was wrong on this issue. One official speaking on the condition of anonymity said a decision has been made and verbal orders have been beginning to start planning for the drawdown. You see, we elected a president. Our Constitution says he's commander-in-chief. What does that mean? Like Harry Truman said with a sign on his desk, it means this is where the final decisions are made and the buck stops here. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for being our president. And thank you, Lord.